Graphic Design faculty at Boston University, and I welcome everyone to what is the 5th edition of the Future History Lecture Series, co-hosted by Boston University and AIGA Boston. The Future History Lecture Series engages the voices in contemporary graphic design. We bring together a master, an established master, and a rising star to consider subjects. Remains to be seen who's the master and who's the rising star. Engaging subjects in design history and the future of design. In addition to inviting an unscripted dialogue on the future and the present of design. Sorry, I totally butchered that. In the past, we've had Matthew Carter, Peter Belock, Ellen Lupton, Jiminy Ha, Ben Fry, Casey Reese, James Victori, Susan Sellers, and Hillary Greenbaum. And tonight we welcome Doug Scott and Scott Stowell. Doug Scott was, until January 2010, creative director at the WGBH Educational Foundation in Boston, a producer and broadcaster of public television and radio programs where he worked since 1974. His major projects at WGBH include Masterpiece Theater, This Old House, Nova Evening at the Symphony, the Victory Garden, Evening at the Pops, the Caption Center, and WGBH Radio. He currently runs a design practice doing book and identity design and is consulting creative director of Davis Publications, an art education publisher in Worcester, Mass. Scott teaches graphic design, information design, typography, and graphic design and graphic design history at Northeastern University, Rhode Island School of Design, and Yale University School of Art. Scott is also a 2016 AIGA Fellow. Well, I'll also introduce Scott Stowell and then hand it over to you guys. Okay, so our second speaker, Scott Stowell, since 1998 has been doing business as open. According to the Cooper Hewitt, he embraces an open notion of the term office, inviting different participants to every project he pursues. Scott has taught at Cooper Union, the School of Visual Arts, and Yale University, lectured in Amsterdam, Rome, and Sydney, among other places, and won the National Design Award for Communication Design. Design for People, his first book, was published by Metropolis Books in 2016 and is available for sale at the door. So I welcome Doug Scott.
Maybe there's other slides on here. Maybe there's some other slides on here. Kristen, I think there's some other slides previous to mine. I used to have one of those.
Oh, okay.
All right, I think it meant to be the rotating introductions at the beginning. So you can kind of just yeah. Okay. So we have events that are coming up in May and June. So keep an eye out on our event page. If you subscribe to our email, you will see all of our events coming out.
But here are a few highlights.
Okay. I'm Doug Scott. I am just going to give you a little brief biography of what I did, and thanks to AIGA for inviting both Scott and me here. I don't get an opportunity to show my work that often because I'm usually too busy, so I'm thrilled to be here, particularly to be with Scott. I trained as an architect for 6 years at the University of Nebraska. In my 3rd year, I thought what graphic design was, and so I started doing graphic design, and I liked it so much that I became one of the major graphic designers for my campus, doing posters and all kinds of things. I also had been working as an architect I had to go into the Army. I went to the Army Reserve for 6 years. I learned how to be a cartographer in the Army, which is useful to me today. I then decided that I wanted to become a graphic designer, and so I decided that I had to go to school. I went to Yale for 2 years, where I met Chris Pullman, who's sitting right down here in front, who was one of my teachers, and I'm happy that he's here tonight. I graduated, and Chris offered me a job at WGBH Television in Boston, where he recently had become the design manager, and then ultimately the vice president for design. Chris did not own a TV, neither did I. So it was kind of a difficult thing. We had to figure out exactly what we were supposed to do, but we were drawn to this place, WGBH Television in Boston, because of the content and the opportunities. I went to work there for 1 year, I thought, and 35 years later I left the building. That's because I was constantly excited by the things that I got to do. I learned an incredible amount of stuff. I worked with excellent people, and we were making 35% of what you see on PBS in the evening times. Work was coming out of Boston. So I want to just give you a couple of things about me. I am a graphic designer. I am a typographer, which is important to me. I try to be efficient. I am always busy. I try to be thoughtful. I consider myself to be an artist engineer. I am a problem solver. I am a teacher of typography, exhibit design, information design, book design, the history of graphic design. I have taught color, all kinds of graphic design studios. And I am most interested in teaching people a good process so that they can become good designers too. I am particularly interested in organizing things. It has always been one of my strengths. 2 things I can tell you, and that is when I was in high school, I was asked to organize how a grocery store ran on Saturdays. And so I took this on as a problem, not knowing it was a graphic design problem at the time. And I learned through doing things that I had a knack for organizing huge things. When I went into the Army, they asked me to organize training for 1,000 men and women in my battalion. And so that's what I did for 2 years. I am a maker of things. I like to make things with my hands. I am a reader, an explainer, and a collector. I am a constructivist. And by that, I can tell you a few things because I talk about this in my history classes. I believe that the construction or making of something determines the form, not a preconceived thing before that. I believe in practical applications for things. I believe mechanization of the means of working, which means I often do not use my own hand to make things. I'm usually finding images like photographs and other images from other times. I also believe in the economic use of material, but I try not to use too much. I make a lot of things with typography. I like color. You are going to see a whole bunch of things I'm going to show you that I have made, and a lot of people look at them and say, oh, those are exuberant, or those are dynamic looking, and that's probably exactly because I am that way. I am interested in scale and contrast. I'm interested also in graphic form, and I am a collage maker, which comes in handy when you're making things. I am interested in printing. I'm interested in things like books, sequence, identity, making systems, mapping, and telling stories. I'm very interested in putting 10 pounds of potatoes into a 5-pound bag. This is something at WGBH we used to talk about a lot because we were trying to jam a lot of stuff, usually into something that was either small or limited. I am interested in things like typewriters and Xerox machines. I am interested in the constraints that the clients or my collaborators give to me. I'm interested always in the possibilities. I believe in getting the message across. I like drawing as thinking and drawing as communicating. So I'm going to take you through some of my work and talk about the things that I have made. First of all, I'm going to show you identities I have done, and some of these identities go back as far as Nebraska, starting in 1968. On the upper left-hand corner, you see 4 eyes revolving around, and this is a logo I did for an American Indian consortium in Nebraska. If you know about the Plains Indians, you know how important circles are. Crescent City Sounds is a New Orleans jazz radio series. This old house, many of you probably know this old house. Chris allowed me to be the first designer for this old house, where I got to actually go into the buildings and help the photographer photograph things. Mopix. This is a thing that was invented at WGBH. If you are deaf, hard of hearing, you go into the theater, watch a movie, there is a cup holder. You put a little device in the cup holder, and in the back of the room back there would be text backwards on the wall so I can watch a movie and see the text. It's like a form of captioning. The First National Bank of Beatrice. This is Beatrice, Nebraska. It is one of my first logos I ever did. HS, Hovland Swanson, a big department store in Lincoln, Nebraska. Cafe Han River, a Korean restaurant in Brookline. And then below that is a Catholic women's school in Boston. On the left, did I talk about all those? I guess I did. On the left, For the Birds, a guy that used to be a WGBH vice president decided to quit and open up a store that sold things for feeding birds and other things for pets. I did the logo for him. Eastern Public Radio, self-explanatory. The Cambridge Science Festival. I noticed just the other day there was a print piece on the festival coming up. I noticed that they have ripped my logo apart, but they have kept some of the things in it. Now, at WGBH, starting in 1980, we used to do work for outside people, and Phoenix is one of those companies. This is a logo for a computer hardware company that makes things that connect things. AR, one of my college friends was the art director of Neiman Marcus in Dallas and sent me this as a job to do. It was a small retail business inside Neiman Marcus. It's called Ann Randall. School Arts, an education magazine. Radio movies, it's such a weird idea, I can't even explain it. It's essentially movies on radio, and it is weird looking. So by now you see, I like to use a lot of weird typefaces. In fact, I have never met a typeface I haven't liked. The House is a public television show that, well, a bunch of kids lived in the house and they had antics. TK&P, a small personal railroad in New York State. Victory, a company that packaged design books. Luz is a cosmetics company. Forum, a WGBH website where you take things from different websites and bring them together at WGBH. On the right, one of the hardest jobs I ever did, the John F. Kennedy Institute of Politics logo. This was one of those nightmare jobs where there were too many clients. And they wanted everything, so we gave them to them. 89.7 is a group of people who liked radio and they would give money. The sponsorship group for public television, this is how public television programs got to be funded. Music America, one of my favorite radio programs done by Ron Della Chiesa, if you remember him. American jazz, American music. The Machine That Changed the World was a series on the history of the computer. Now on the right, the Reading Railroad. When I was a student at Nebraska, I had made up a problem for myself to design an identity. I did it for the Reading Railroad because I like railroads. And I sent it to them, and I had letters back and forth to them until they finally said, "I'm sorry, kid, we don't need your logo." Long ago and far away, a radio program and television program that was about children's stories. The next one down there, The Men with the Pink Triangle, was a radio series about Nazi atrocities, particularly against gay communities. On the right, a logo, Tycho, for a coffee shop in New Haven, Connecticut when I was a student at Yale. I worked for, just below that on the left there, I worked for Emmanuel College for 3 years, was my client. I actually redrew that logo. It was also a very difficult thing because, of course, they didn't want to get rid of anything. Unit, a logo for a student-run art supply store in Nebraska. Below that, Art Plus Design, X Media, Times Media, is a logo I did for our department in Candy. They refused to use this. WGBH Radio had many logos over the years, but this is one of the most interesting little shapes I made. I collaborated on the Zoom logo. Some of you might remember Zoom. Yeah. There were two Zoom things. This was the one later in my career there, and I got to design this logo with Ellis John Acostas. Below that, for Davis Publications, a music program that teaches music training. Below that, the Brookfield Zoo. Some of you from Chicago might know this. This is another job. I did it when I was a student in Nebraska. I wrote them a letter. I got a lot farther with them with this than I did with that other job. They actually considered this as their logo for about a year. Didn't work. Discussions for Learning is a textbook program. It's a fascinating idea, and that is children look at pieces of art, and then they have to talk about the pieces of art, and this is a vocabulary builder program that Davis sells. Below that, one of my most interesting things, I'm not supposed to show you this, because I did it for the U.S. Postal Service. This is a symbol for the Postal Union of the Americas and Spain, which I got paid for, as one usually does in the government, but they never adopted this logo, so I made stamps for this logo. On the right, a construction company, Ridge Construction. One of my main clients in the early years at WGBH was a music group called the Boston Music Viva. And probably one of the biggest things I've done is for Davis Publications, where I had been doing work for them since 1988. I think that's 29 years. And when I worked at GBH, they were one of our main outside clients. And when I finally left WGBH, I took them on as my major client, which I do with two of my colleagues. So I designed an identity for them, and it's on hundreds of books. Now we get into the more interesting things. So I was lucky to do program guides for both TV and radio. And this is the radio, which was always one of my favorite clients because I am a radio listener. So this was a program that came out every month, and you can see the names on air, and this is the cover, and it's printed pretty cheaply, let's say. And so it was on newsprint, and I only had 2 colors to use, and there was a limited numbers of colors you could use. And so I was trying to get the most out of the least by doing things like this. Here are 2 more of those covers. I remember after I did this Chicago Jazz on-air one, there was an article in the AIGA magazine about the beginnings of postmodernism. And they used this as one of the examples, which always made me laugh, because I certainly was not interested in being postmodern. The Beethoven one is one of my favorites. However, it's a pretty simple, picture of Beethoven, his signature, and the logo. This is what the inside of this magazine looked like. And you can see here we're trying to put 10 pounds of potatoes in a 5-pound bag. I also worked on the television side, doing the program guide for many years. It was called GBH at this time. And I got to choose a photograph and then pick a color combination for all the other material on the cover. And at this time, you usually were given, or you could have a choice between the 2 best pictures you could use, and you did the best you could with these. This is what the inside of this looked like. Now, the great delight for me in doing this was, again, the small typographic detail. At this time, we had 2 stations, channel 2 and 44. By the time I left, I think we had 6 or 8 stations, and I had to come up with a typographic arrangement that people could actually look at this and figure out what was on TV at the right time. I was also thrilled often to do small jobs. On the left is an invitation for a show called Irish Treasures, where I had to find an image and do the best I can to make an 8.5 by 11 thing that would be folded and sent through the mail. On the right, one of my many Masterpiece Theater things. Again, here it's just the program listings, and this was sent out to many people so they would know what is on. That logo, ExxonMobil Masterpiece Theater, was done by Chris Pullman. I love doing invitations. At this point, I should tell you, 1 year of my working at WGBH, I did 250 jobs in 1 year. And I know that because in my calendar, I would always write when a job went to the printer, or I Xeroxed it and sent it out. And I was stunned by that number. And this is one of the reasons that I liked being there, because everything was possible. And you would turn around and somebody would be giving you a job to do. And eventually, you would be getting bigger teams of people to do stuff and to be efficient. An invitation for this little house where I used the logo in a new way, where it says a sneak preview and you just open it up, and this is what you see on the inside. I love small jobs. This Morning Pro Musica live performance series is done with the typewriter. This was instituted by Chris for us to set type. This is before the time of photo type that we all had access to. Typography was quite expensive. So we used the typewriter, and then I would use Letraset, which is rub-off letters for this stuff that says Morning Pro Musica and live performance series. And then this thing would be printed in the thousands, and then we would put it on the Xerox machine on the other side, imprint what was going on at that live performance series. a little postcard that I've always loved, but I did it back in 1976. I still like looking at it. And the idea here was you do the best you can, and you try to advance what you know in typography from doing even a simple little job. The lifeblood of WGBH was doing proposals. These were printed documents that had inside who were the players were going to be, how much money did you need, what was the content of the program. And so this one, I got this job. I had to do it quickly. I went home. I had my mother's typewriter. I put it on the floor, took a picture of it. Next morning, gave the picture to be printed because it had to be sent out and made a print. Came back and I put letter set actually on the photograph. And this is what you see right here. Don Pasquale, an opera. This was from an old thing that I took, the typography. This is a generic proposal cover for WGBH radio. At this time, of course, it was records on turntables. And that is what I am referencing here. And if you look closely, you will see 89.7. That was our frequency, 89.7. Another proposal. And almost all of these were successful because WGBH knew how to write a proposal to get the money from somebody to make a program. This is a history of the Windsor family, the current queen. This, a proposal done on the Xerox machine, very quickly, the inside pages. And this was going to go to Japan so the Japanese corporations would have the opportunity to help fund our programs. Eastern Public Radio logo, letterhead, and then a catalog cover. And this was also printed on the Xerox machine. I have done tons of letterheads for different programs. Sometimes doing the identity or making up the identity on the spot. Here are 4 letterheads for different television programs. And most of these letterheads were used as promotional letterheads. So they were not fancy things. They had text imprinted on them to give information about the programs. One of the first press kits I ever did was Leonardo Da Vinci, a program, letterhead in the upper left-hand corner. I like showing this note one because it was a one-color letterhead. So I decided to make things white on the purple background. And my favorite letter, of course, is the Rainbow Studio. This was one of my businesses in Nebraska. The third guy on the left is me. So, this guy right here. My business partners. We worked together for 2 years. The guy next to me with the big hair became an art director of Rolling Stone magazine. Sometimes the eyes and the prize thing right here, the eyes and the prize was to pick an iconic photograph and then use it in high contrast. This is a march in the South. I have done tons of press kits. I'm just going to show you 2 right here. One is the Hallmark Hall of Fame, which was on PBS for a short time. It is picking the right photograph and then doing something with the typography I ever made when I studied at Yale. One of my great loves, I told you, was radio, and I got to do posters, usually with the host of the program. There wasn't a bunch of middle people in the way. The one that I did on the left was with May Kramer, a wonderful friend of mine who did the blues program late at night, Blues After Hours. She and I talked for like 10 or 15 minutes about what quality this thing should have. And then I used letter set, I Xeroxed it, I crumbled it up and redid it again, and we made this poster that was pretty big. The one on the right for the Jazz Decades, also a one-color job. And then when we had some money to spend, I did this one. I also did a logo for him, the Jazz Decades, right here, choosing some of the great labels from the time period. One of my greatest loves was this project. Chris Pullman and I did this together. So at WGBH Radio, we played classical music and we played jazz. And so if you look at the text, it's kind of hard to see here. It says, for those people who like both sides, both jazz and classical. And Chris and I sat in a room and we came up with these names of taking a jazz person and a classical person and putting them together. I'm just showing you one, Fats Wagner. This is like Fats Waller. So we had this in mind. We did Thelonious Bach, Jelly Roll Mozart, and my favorite was Chris's Bix Buxtehude. Do you know who Buxtehude is? He is a Baroque composer. Thank you, Glenn Mahler. Okay, an ad on the right. We did Moby Dick on radio. And so I went back and used the illustration by Rockwell Kent from one of the great printings of this story. And up at the top there, it says, just when you thought it was safe to go back to WGBH radio. A poster for a Greek composer, Mikis Theodorakis. So here was my problem to solve. Setting type, I had no Greek type. And so I had learned how to draw letters like this from one of my teachers, Dan Friedman at Yale. And so this was the perfect time for me to put that into use, because I had to draw both the Roman alphabet and the Greek alphabet. 2 covers I did. For a while, I worked with Simmons students who did their Simmons Review magazine. This is one, the issue was on music. And then on the right, Chris and I and some other designers were offered to do a design for an anniversary for DQ magazine, unfortunately no longer in business, but this was Design Quarterly, probably the best design magazine. So this is my version of that, which is DQ 166. We also did work for institutions that we believed in. One of those is Apt Associates, which is a consulting company in Cambridge. When I was working with them, one of their big jobs was to completely redo the Iraqi healthcare system. This was their job. And so how can you not help people that had a job like that? So for 2 years, our office did all of the design work and reports and booklets and things like that. These 3 things represent, somebody was talking to me, I think I met somebody in a restaurant, and all of a sudden I was doing work for the Open Door Theater. And that is because every organization needs help in their design. The Opera Company of Boston did their letterheads. And this was one of the people in our office who lived in Wayland, Massachusetts, and so I did a book to talk about the historical quality of Wayland. 2 covers for Emmanuel magazine, the Emmanuel Quarterly I did when I did the work for them for 3 years. An AIGA job that I did together with Jeff Freed. Some of you might know Jeff. He teaches at Lesley University. Okay. So Jeff and I were asked to write an essay about why we are teachers and what we think is important. We decided to call it the Common Core, and I have to tell you, this is before the Common Core is what it is today. And so then it was 3 essays that we wrote, and then I did the design of this, the black text, and the red is all quotations. This is one of the best things. I still give this to my class at Northeastern, people to read this, because this essay, I think, brings into focus all the issues of why we teach design. One of my biggest influences is the actual construction of collages that I make. I've made hundreds of collages. I see this as a good use of my time. It makes me happy. I remember in becoming a manager at WGBH, I had less design work to do and more managing of people. And this is when I really started to make collages, because I needed that outlet. I think most of us do. This is what they look like, and they shouldn't be surprising to you when you've just seen all that other stuff and all my jobs floating around on the page. Oops, sorry. A lot of complex jobs I have to do. This little thing on the top here, this pie chart, is funding for a big important WGBH project. And this was the way to visualize so that everybody knew where the money was going. Timelines. Almost every teacher job I did had timelines. I was also the designer of an organization that has changed hands. It is called the Design Museum of Boston. I did several jobs for them. This is one, Bridge Row, which is looking at all the bridges that cross the 4-Point Channel. It is a huge poster this big. And this one, also one of my favorite jobs. WGBH transmitter for the radio is on MDC property, the Metropolitan District Commission. Instead of paying them rent one year, we proposed that we do an educational project. This is the one we proposed, 2 of us. It got written, designed, printed, and sent to every school within the MDC district that explained the reservoir out in the middle of Massachusetts and how the water comes into the city and where does it go. Because of my architectural background, I have done a lot of exhibits, and I teach this at RISD. On the upper left corner here is an exhibit about a guy who graduated from RISD in 1951 and worked at CBS, Esquire, and pharmaceutical industry. And so I got to go through all his stuff and put an exhibit together. On the right of Dust Bowl Descent is a huge exhibit that I did in 1979. It is still traveling in the Mid-America Art Alliance area, which is the Great Plains. And this is you can see those people looking at pictures there. One of those is a Farm Security Administration picture, and the other is one taken by a friend of mine who went and interviewed that person who had been photographed. There is a book. It is called Of Dust Bowl Descent. I can just tell you the best one is Migrant Mother. You might know her. I just showed you the cover. My friend Bill found her living in Oakland, California, got her story, took a picture of her. Before, the one that was done early is her with her 3 children, very small. And the picture he took of her, she's sitting in a lawn chair in Oakland, California, with her 3 grown daughters around her. This is an exhibit we did. This was actually a big WGBH thing. This is an exhibit about abolition, particularly in Boston with William Lloyd Garrison. It was an exhibit at the Boston Public Library and the Museum of African American History on Beacon Hill. This exhibit in the black here is about the building of the Nebraska State Capitol, which was designed by Bertram Goodhue and built, finally finished in the 1930s. This explains how it was built, and for 6 months it was in the main hallway. This is an AIGA job that I did with Joanna Bodenweber. We did an exhibit of 20 to 30 designers you would call the first generation of modern designers in America. We collected all this work and put it over at Leslie, actually the Art Institute of Boston at the time. We were also interested in signage at WGBH, so we ended up doing signage for the John F. Kennedy Museum. 2 examples. My great love has been books. So for 29 years I've been doing work for Davis. I've designed probably 200 books for them and other kinds of small things. This is one of my favorites. It is a big art history book for high school students. I love to show this in my classes wherever I'm teaching, and people say, oh, I had that book in high school. And I said, well, now you can blame me for everything you didn't like about art history. This is a separation page, part page, the beginning of a chapter. One of the best things I get to do at Davis is I get to design the teacher editions. This is why teachers are so smart. They have this book that tells them everything to say. And so this is typical right here. If you see there's a white pages on either side of that spiral, that is what the student is looking at, and all that stuff around the edge right there is what the teacher is supposed to know and tell you. I think the first book I ever designed was a This Old House book, and then it started me on getting a whole bunch of jobs. This is one for Nova, related to Nova, the flight of the red knot. You see in the top spread right there, there's a whole bunch of horseshoe crabs. They all come ashore in New Jersey, lay their eggs, these horseshoe crabs, and the red knots come streaming over just at that week. Eat as many eggs as they can go so they can continue on their journey. This was also a WGBH job, a film about Thomas Hart Benton, a great American artist. This job I got because I just knew somebody who worked at Addison Wesley, and they had trouble getting a good design out of several designers, and so they had me come look at it. I gave them my advice, and then a week later they said, we fired those designers. Will you do this book for us? It is an amazing book. I'll just tell you one little story about this. This is photographs of cosmonauts and astronauts taken from space. And the text is their words. And the typesetter, Mary Jane Walsh, from our office, was typesetting this, and she was crying. She was sitting near me. I thought she was having trouble with her boyfriend. I went over and talked to her, and she said, I can't believe how beautiful these things are. This is why she was crying. I know other people have told me they have cried looking at this book. This is one of the most interesting stories, this book. Prentice Hall came to us and said, we want to do a book that previously was 4 colors. Will you do it in 2 because we can save a fortune? And of course our answer was, yes, we can. This book has about 200 styles, if you know what styles are. That's how many things are in this book, but it's done in 2. I've also always tried to support organizations that support designers. This one, the Book Builders. I designed posters for them, and this is the catalog back in 1988. Photographs of great gardens of the world. I was even contacted one by the Easton Press saying, would you do Hemingway's books, but we want them in leather and we want them tooled. Will you do designs for them? And of course, my answer always is yes, I will. And then I had to figure out how to do that. So you see right here, the fifth column, the red one. This is about the Spanish bombing, or the Franco's Spanish soldiers bombing cities in Spain. And then the other one is the old man on the sea. Those are little fish in a net. Now, at the end here, I'm going to talk about my great love, and that is I love to collect stuff and I love to show it. When I worked at WGBH in the 70s, I took part of our hallway and I would just put up stuff there that I thought people would like. So eventually I started teaching at RISD in 1980, and I kept looking at these bad cases for years, and finally I had it. So I finally said, will you give me control of these cases? And so in 2000, I took control of the major cases in the Design Center at RISD, and I've been showing 1 or 2 exhibits every month since then. I've done a poster for every one of those shows. That means, since 2000, I have done probably over 300 posters for all the shows I have done, and most of this stuff is stuff I have collected or people have loaned me. So, this is my telephone collection that I have. I have 30 plastic telephones, nothing mobile, just old plastic things that plug into the wall. I love them. And so this is a show of those in there in the poster I did for them. Also, the work of Sister Corita Kent, one of my favorite characters. This is examples that I have. I have a big collection of her work. I have favorite designers. One of them is Derek Birdsall, a British book designer. I have about 30 of his books, so I would put them in there and then I would do this poster. Now what's nice about these posters is I am the client, so I can do whatever I want. This big poster is by Dudovich, Kaufer, Cassandra, and Tom Purvis. And you'll see I use a different typeface almost every time, just because that's the way I am. Jan Tschicholt's title pages and text pages. I collect a lot of Penguin books. I probably have 1,000. This is the Penguin Poetry Series, one of my favorites. The Art of Modern Rock. These are rock posters done recently. They are small format, mostly silkscreen. One of the students in my class at RISD collected them with her boyfriend, so she asked if we could show them in the cases. This one is about letterpress, obviously. This is the 1974 transportation symbols. So I'm showing you these two together because sometimes I am a minimalist. So I decided to have the two little characters right there talking to each other. And then next to it is a lecture I gave at Brown University on the history of printing. And this is my maximal phase. Not only did I have all that stuff on there, I even had little W's floating around in the background like bugs. I have a great collection. My largest collection is of railroad ephemera. And then this 47 years, 74 clients is a talk I gave at RISD 2 years ago, having been a designer for 47 years at that time. And I had had 74 clients, I thought. And the last thing, what I have up right now at RISD and Northeastern. RISD, I'm showing World War I posters, some small, some large, because 100 years ago the United States entered World War I. And on the right at Northeastern, currently, a show of Jacqueline Casey's posters, who did posters for MIT for 30 years. I have a lot of them from that time period. I knew Jackie, and whenever I would go visit her, she would give me one of her posters. Thanks a lot.
Hi, it's halftime. Hi, I'm Scott, and I met Doug, I think you were my teacher 29 years ago? Did I figure that out? 1988. First of 3 times, that was type 2. And then graphic design history and exhibit design. Right? Okay. I got it right, I remember. So about 10 years after I first had a class with Doug, I had a couple jobs in New York and elsewhere, and I started a design studio called Open. And at Open we do all kinds of stuff. This will hopefully start. Oh, it didn't go. This is a GIF. I spent a long time. That's strange. Well, there was a lot of stuff in there. I'll post it online tomorrow or something. You can enjoy the GIF. It's 30 seconds. Anyway, we've been doing a lot of stuff for, we had been doing a lot of stuff for about 15 years when I decided to make this book, which some of you were nice enough to purchase up front. And the others will do so later, I'm sure. But anyway, and this book basically was a kind of a lifetime project for me. It took about a year or 2 years or 5 years or my whole life to do, depending on how you look at it. And I'm not going to talk about it tonight, because I want to talk about what happened since that book. The subhead or subtitle of the book is Stories About How and Why We All Can Work Together to Make Things Better. And there's a lot of work in that book and a lot of stories. We interviewed hundreds of people and lots of people worked on it, and it was a craziness of a project. One thing I learned is that I understand why every other design book is just a bunch of big pictures with captions, because you can actually finish it, making it. Anyway, so I want to focus on part of that subtitle, which is Making Things Better. And I'm just going to show you, rather than a whole bunch of work or that GIF I planned on showing you, just 5 projects that we've done since then that didn't make it into the book, and some of them are not even finished yet. And then I just have a little thing to read to you at the end. So the first thing is a project for a school in the Bronx down in New York City called Riverdale Country School. I believe it is, if not the #1 most expensive private school, it's up there. It's quite expensive. They have financial aid. But anyway, we recently worked on a new building for them that's designed by some architects named Architecture Research Office in New York. And in this building, we did all kinds of interesting signage. There was a wall with all the kids' names and fun directional signage on the floor and little notes about the building. It's all very colorful. But I want to talk to you about what happened before this, which is that, of course, they had a building before that had to get knocked down to build the new building. And so for about a year, all the kids in this fancy, I said this on purpose, expensive school, that are going to have this fancy building, had to go to school in this. And so we got the job to make this a reasonable place for kids to go to school for a year. So the architects actually designed this too. Good job. And this does not look like fun. And they didn't have a lot of money, but they came to us and said, can you do something with this? And we had the idea of like, well, basically these kids, it's 3rd, 4th, 5th grade was this building. And so 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders get to basically go out outside in trailers to school for a year. That sounds fun. So can we make it like a special experience that these kids would have, that they would be sad to go into that fancy building at the end of the year? So we started by looking at stuff like this. This is Moonrise Kingdom, the Wes Anderson film, and this is the favela painting project where they did this crazy stuff to these apartment buildings. And of course, stuff like this. We didn't make any of this. This is just inspiration. This is all stickers and things for, I think it's the Boy Scouts. And so we had this idea to kind of make this fun experience that was like so special to these kids that they would not want to move out of these terrible trailers. Oh, and by the way, the trailers were rented, so we couldn't even do anything permanent to them. We had to be able to peel it all off afterwards because they had to get their security deposit back. So we decided we would create these kind of graphic identities for the 3 grades of the kids. And the idea we had was to get the kids involved to actually design the stuff. Now, of course, you don't want to go to a bunch of, at that time, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th graders and say, hey kids, what do you want to have in your school on the wall? So we gave them choices. We thought if we give them a bunch of colors and a bunch of patterns and a bunch of drawings, then they might pick some and then something might come out of it. So we had an election with the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th graders the year that they would go into this. And those are the ballots. Each kid got to pick a color, a picture, and a pattern. And we did not care what they picked. And we used exactly what they picked. So here are the winners. 3rd grade picked blue and lavender. those patterns, I don't care which ones they are, and a turtle, a bridge, and a painting, an icon of a painting. Such a weird thing. And then the 4th grade year got 2 blues, and they picked an anchor, an atom, and a peace sign. And then the 5th graders ended up with, they all picked blue. We suspect the system is rigged. But blue and red, and they had those patterns, and they got a baseball bat, a Saturn, and sunglasses. So now we had to use this stuff to make the graphics, because that's what won the election. So there you go. Here we are entering the 3rd grade area. There's that turtle hanging around. You see some directional signage in the back. All of this stuff is done as vinyl wraps, which took a week to install and like 30 seconds to remove. Just peel it. There's a pattern and some signage for the classroom. There you see part of the 3rd and 4th grade areas, and then there's the bathroom on the right. That's a cool 4th grade wall there. I had the anchor too. We made flags. They were actually hand sewn here in Massachusetts. New England Flag Company. Now we're getting into 5th grade. And there you see kind of how everything kind of mixes together. And then here's the last thing. Cool sunglasses, 5th graders. With the 5th grade flag flying there. It was really cool. We had this idea to make flags, and unbeknownst to us, the school decided to have this flag raising ceremony at the beginning of the year, and there was like a janitor with a bugle and stuff. It's on Vimeo if you want to check it out. Of course, he's probably like the dean or something, but maybe he's not the janitor. Anyway, okay, here's another project. In Manhattan, in New York City, there is a park, a very beautiful park called Bryant Park. And anybody who knows the history of New York City knows that Bryant Park used to be part of the reservoir for Manhattan. It's behind the New York Public Library main branch. And for many years it became a park, and then back in the 70s and 80s, before my time in New York, it was known as Needle Park. And it was basically the place you would go to get some heroin. And they don't have it there anymore. They don't sell heroin there anymore, but they poured a lot of money into fixing up the park. And so you see this beautiful oasis in the middle of these skyscrapers, and it is really magical. And the thing about Bryant Park is that it's known for that lawn, which they keep really meticulously, and those little chairs, those cafe chairs. In fact, their old logo was a picture of those chairs. Anyway, but the thing is, Bryant Park is not just a place to hang out and sit around. They have an organization that puts on thousands of events every year. They have yoga almost every morning with 1,200 people participating together. They have ping pong tables, they have stuff for kids, they have stuff for families, they have workshops, concerts, they have movies for free at night. It's a huge organization with all this stuff, all totally free. And their website, however, we did not make this. The picture looks very nice. But the thing is, this website was made many years ago when they did not have as many events, they did not have as much to say, and the website is bursting at the seams. This is the drop-down menu, and that's a lot of stuff. And the thing is, Bryant Park is used by many, many millions of people from New York and from the area and from all over the world, tourists. And the thing is, when we got this project to work on the website, we went and, of course, interviewed everybody who worked there, and they have an in-house design department, and the development people, and the janitors, for instance, the custodians, people that have to take care of the horticulture and all that stuff. But I think my favorite interview we did was their receptionist. Now, they have a policy at the Bryant Park offices that they will always have a live person answering the phone. And actually, that live person is a person that does that job for a little while and then moves on to be like a planner or an architect or something. So they get on the front lines of who's calling them. So we talked to the receptionist and we said, okay, what calls do you get too often that we can deal with on the website? And so there was all kinds of information that we got from that. I'll show you in a minute. But then I said, who calls all the time? And they said, well, there is Doris. She calls every day. And she calls basically to find out what's going on in the park that day, and sometimes to find a page on the website. So they will talk her through it on the phone live and say, go on over to this thing and press the drop-down menu, go to the 5th thing. And so Doris became our main client for this project. I mean, we haven't met her, but I wanted it to work for her. So as you can see, the current site is bursting at the seams. I mean, they have thousands of events. This does not look like they have thousands of events. And so we spent months and months interviewing people and doing the usual design process and so on. And I just want to show you a couple features of this site, which is launching next week. We'll see. So the home page itself now is basically trying to encapsulate the feeling of being in the park. There was a notion from the head of it that they wanted the website to feel live. They don't have a lot of hours to spend putting information into the website, and in fact in the old version they had to type it in 5 different places. There was no database, it was ridiculous. A fax machine was involved. And so they wanted to be able to input it in one place and have the website basically kind of make everything, and that's common, a database-driven website, but also to kind of make itself seem more new than it had to be based on the labor put into it. So if you go to the website, at one time it might look like this, and you go a few minutes later and refresh it, it'll get different stuff. And everything that's on the homepage is a selection of all the events that are going on and all the amenities, just kind of bubbling up through a filter that gets reshuffled every time. There is stuff like this. For some reason they wanted to have the time and the weather. Not like you can't get the time and weather elsewhere, but it does give a feeling of being in the park. Like the park feels like this right now. And they said a lot of people go to the website, they might be in Sweden or Germany or something, and they're going to go on vacation and come to New York, and they go to the site, so it helps them feel what it's like. The lawn is very important to people, so right at the top of the homepage is this thing saying whether the lawn is open or not. Of course, the website works on mobile as well. The other one, of course, did not. And the events I mentioned, there are thousands and thousands of events happening there. There was no search capability before, and we built this entire system to say, you know, what happens today? What happens every day? And then can I go through and say, well, today I want to do something, or I want to go this weekend and take a class. There's a fly fishing class in Bryant Park this weekend. Or I want to go on June 2nd and take a class. So the point is you can pick a time, you can pick an activity very far in advance. This seems like basic stuff, but it was huge for them. And the other things I want to show you are less practical, but the website changes every day, the color. There are 365 or 66 different colors that happen throughout the year. And we kind of slipped this into them because at first it was like, well, the website looks a little different today, the staging site. And of course you don't really know it's changing until you really look at it for quite a long time or every day. And again, it's meant to mirror kind of the experience of being in the park. Of course, the other thing about this homepage is it says what's going on today. Of course, if you were to go there at this hour or sometime after sunset, it switches to this. And that it all happens automatically. So much of this was new to them. They had a team of interns kind of throwing switches and deleting files and things whenever something didn't happen a certain day. So now they're saving a ton of hours, and I don't know, we think the site's pretty. A very different project we did is for a nonprofit in New York called the Sylvia Center. And the Sylvia Center is an organization that teaches classes to kids, typically kids that are, you know, not rich kids. The Riverdale kids are not in these classes. And their families about how to eat well, how to shop for good food, how to cook, and just even the concept of having meals together as an activity that's good for the family. So they came to us. We knew them from another project. And they came to us and they said, we have this gala coming up. You know, Doug mentioned a lot of these invitations for these events. We do a lot of those too for fundraisers. And you go to these things and there's always a video of people kind of saying, this organization that you paid a lot of money to come to this event to see is really great. I really love how great they are, this organization. And everybody sits there and watches this video talking about how great the place is that you already bought a ticket to the event for. So they said, could you make a video for our gala? And we said, well, you teach kids how to cook, right? Yes. How many kids have you taught how to cook? Oh, thousands. Are they like fun? Are they smart kids? Oh, lots of them, sure. Well, let's just have them do the video. So if they are learning how to cook, and why don't we have them demonstrate what they've learned? And we'll just make a YouTube cooking show for you. And so we started a cooking show called Now We're Cooking. And I'm going to show you the first episode. Don't worry, it's short. Hopefully this works. Okay, something's happening. I'm going to try that again. Why is it not working? This is really strange. Talk amongst yourselves for 30 seconds. Okay. Oh, just one moment. Keynote crash, thanks. Don't worry. Now it's telling me. No. You can cut this part out of the video, right? Or not. Okay. Wait, let's see if the gift works. We'll show it at the end. Oh. Okay, fingers crossed.
And today we're making shashuka with roasted eggplant. First, preheat the oven to 350 degrees. Dice the eggplant and roast it for about 20 minutes. And I'll be cutting this onion. Anybody want to eat one? Great. Cut the tomatoes into chunks. And place it in a blender with garlic and tomato. Set the sauce aside until later. Saute the onions, eggplant, and peppers with olive oil. Great job. Doesn't it smell good? You know how to stuff it, right? Remember? You remember? Just, take it. Does smell good. I'm sure it will taste good. Yeah, spiral it out. All of it. Drop in the eggs one at a time. And put the pan in the oven for 15 minutes. Hey, Dad.
Hey,
We're cooking.
okay.
Tear the basil. Maybe you can get your husband to help with that.
So, tear some basil for a topping.
Grate the cheese and sprinkle on top. Serve with your favorite baguette and enjoy. Baguette.
Time to eat. It's delicious.
It is, right? It is. Well, I got to thank all you guys. You guys definitely pitched in the kitchen, right? Good job.
It opened my eyes that I have to let them participate. And I know that they're able to participate was a plus. They're more willing to eat the food once they have hands-on experience in cooking it. The family cooking with the Sylvia Center is A-okay with me. It really is though.
Nathan was the best. Everybody always claps at videos. I love that. Yay. Nathan was the best. He was a cut up all day until we finally had to get him on camera to say time to eat, and it took like 20 takes for him to even open his mouth. Okay, we have a client, another client for many years, another park. Brooklyn Bridge Park in New York. It is 85 acres of formerly industrial waterfront south of the Brooklyn and Manhattan bridges. In New York, we've done a lot of different signage for them over the years, and interestingly, the landscape architect, Michael Van Valkenburg, and his team who designed the park wanted it to be very experiential. So when you go to the park, you do not see a big map at the entrance saying where everything is. Most of the wayfinding is like this. It's these things where it tells you it's that way, and then if you walk that way, you'll see another sign that's something that we thought we didn't want. And there we go. One of these people is in the room tonight. It's not one of the confused tourists. Anyway, and finally, at the end of this whole process, we're finally installing them this month. So there's one of the good ones. And it's been really interesting because they actually ended up costing just a few $100s each and made in-house, and then if something breaks, they can just basically take it in there. And it's been a really fun process. The last of these 5 projects I want to show you is a TV project. And we got called by this client late last year, just after the election. And they, if you don't know this channel, it's called Fuse. It started in Canada as a kind of MTV. It was called Much Music. It came here, they changed their name. They were a music channel. They were a Latino channel for a while. There were a lot of different things. And now they're launching themselves in the United States in 2017 as the channel that's all about multiculturalism, which I think is fantastic because it seems to not be the prevailing feeling these days. So we actually pitched them an idea that was very, very simple. And it was about the idea that America today is about different kinds of people bumping up against each other, doing different things. Everyone is their own kind of thing, and everyone is not just one thing. In other words, Doug just spoke to you, and he's a designer slash teacher slash constructivist slash many other things. And I'm probably some of those things and other things too. You could be an artist slash writer, or a retiree slash basketball player, or whatever. Everyone is more than one of those things, and that language is very common to us. We say that all the time. So we thought, could we build an entire design system around that by putting these ideas together with words, pictures, emoji, other images, and make everything out of this very simple system that doesn't care whether it's a printed thing, on a screen, in motion, or anything else. So these are images for this thing they do called Crash the Parties, where they send these journalists to go to the Democratic and Republican conventions. This is a show about this person named Big Frida, who is a drag performer in New Orleans, known as the Queen of Big Bounce Music. And you can see we're telling stories with images and words with all these slashes between them. They can become serious. This is a documentary called Indivisible about immigration. They have shows that are not serious. This one is called Celebrity Puppet Shit Show. Sorry, Mom. My mom's sitting. Where they act out funny celebrity stories with marionettes. I don't know why. This is a show by this comic named Fluffy, who travels around and basically eats Guy Fieri food and then tries to work off the same amount of calories in the gym. So you start to see the language here: burger slash burger slash burger slash fluffy, workout slash workout slash workout slash fluffy. We made IDs that are basically GIFs. Of course, this isn't plain, just like the other GIF. And we can also do more serious things with it. There's a documentary about Ferguson called Show Me Democracy that they've done. Basically what we've done for them is create a language, not necessarily a layout or a composition, but a system where you can translate messages. Like if they wrote a social media post, which they did, there was some rumor that Adele was going to stop touring, and we turned it into hello / goodbye. And then, this is not going to run either. Oh, there we go. This GIF works. So, and again, that same language can fit into any format, into any medium, in any place. And even just typed into a tweet itself. I have no idea what this tweet is about. I didn't write it. It involves Danny DeVito. But the point is, the entire design system is basically a language that they can use, which embraces things like emoji, but is not trying to be sort of like too cool. It's basically, they can type it, they can lay it out, they can use it with imagery, and then also they can do it in motion. I think is May 22nd. So we're in the middle of making a bunch of this stuff now. And the amazing thing I will say about creating a sort of system like this that is just a language is that after we delivered the first elements, they started calling us and saying that we didn't have to bother to send the next ones because they just made them themselves already. Because the rules were so clear, they just started making this stuff. Anyway, so I mentioned I had one more thing after those 5 projects. And it's a project that I wish I could show you tonight, but I can't, so I'm going to tease you. We got this email last fall from a guy I didn't know that says, an interesting project. People at Open. My name is John. I'm working at an agency that is starting some, quote, branding. I love putting the quotes around that. Work for, name redacted, just for a minute. Feels weird to use that word for an organization like theirs. And are looking for a design partner. Long been a fan of the studio, and I think you could be a perfect fit for this assignment. I'm writing to gauge interest in a project like that this fall for you guys. So we were interested, and we did say we wanted to do it, and it was an organization that I've supported for many years already. And notice the date of the email, this was in September, and I thought, yeah, I guess, I hadn't really thought about them for a long time, but yeah, we'd love to do some work with them. And we did 1 or 2 meetings. And then the election happened, and of course the election was something that nobody expected, regardless of what you were thinking might happen or wanted to happen. And the next morning, we remembered, oh yeah, we're rebranding the ACLU. So I can't show it to you yet. You might even have to edit this out. But I will say, the reason why I wanted to mention it was not just to tease. Because, you know, the book that we did was all about inviting different people into the process and at the same time being very obsessive about our work. And all the projects I just showed you were about trying to make things better for people in different ways and also inviting different participants, whether it's that family cooking or Doris not knowing how to use a website or the guys in the shop making the signs instead of hiring a fancy company. And that's something we want to do more and more of, because we think that every project is a special opportunity to do that. And this one, I will say, is at a level beyond any of those. And we're supposed to launch July 4th, so you can look for some brand new post or something where people will trash the logo, maybe. Hopefully not. But in the meantime, I just want to go back to that book that I mentioned, my book, and just read one little section of it to you. Every project is full of opportunities to make things better. Could we do more with less money? Let's give the project a clearer name. Hey, we rewrote your copy. How about a website instead of a sign? I think it's our job to keep coming up with ideas like these. And if we get shot down, it's our job to keep trying. There's always a way to make things better, even if it's just getting ready for the next thing that you can make better. The things we have to deal with every day don't usually happen on purpose. Most of them are the result of a multitude of unpredictable coincidences. We can't control what happens to us, but we can control what we do about it. We take what we get and make the best of it. And then what we make of it becomes the reason it happened in the first place. The world we live in is the result of the choices we make, so we can always make things better by making the best of things, no matter what. So I'll change this a little because I'm saying this out loud. So you and I find ourselves in our own special situation. Me saying these words at this point of my life, now. You hearing this at exactly this moment. This has never happened before and will never happen again. What will you do next? It's your turn. Go. Thanks.
So we have probably 15 minutes for Scott and Scott to speak. And I'll also open the floor up to you guys. And I have 2 mics here. If you guys have any questions, just make sure you have a mic before you ask your question.
I wrote the introduction to the forward to Scott's book, and I would like you to read it at some point, because it shows what I think of it. You can imagine, I think a lot.
I have a question. So, you said it took like 1 year to implement the Brooklyn Bridge Park signs, like from the ideation to the application, right? I was gonna ask, what was the process like during that 1 year?
A lot of waiting, a lot of meetings, honestly, a lot of missing deadlines, because they had a lot going on in that park, and they liked the general idea of it, but they couldn't figure out how to deal with it, you know? And with an organization like that, and like a lot of the other ones we work with, there's a lot of people that have to, deal with it. And in a park, there's also stuff like they have to put it in the ground, and people can't trip over it, and stuff like that. So there was a lot of us researching production methods. And then there was a lot of us calling them and saying, hey, we figured it out. And they're saying, well, it's snowing out now, so forget it until the spring. So it's not like we're doing it the whole time, but like we're kind of doing the best we can, and then blowing it sometimes, and then catching up. So pretty much like any other.
Hi. So you both work on very different types of projects. Can you speak a little bit about how you're inspired by each other's work?
Doug mentioned in his own intro of yourself this idea of being a constructivist. And it's funny, we talked about it a lot when we were preparing for this. I remembered that from, I don't know, 30 years ago, 29 years ago. And I think most people, or a lot of people, when they hear that word, they think of like, well, like we said, like red and black stuff flying around, you know, Russian stuff, triangles. And I think that that was just a manifestation of other stuff happening at the same time. I mean, obviously it's colors and, you know, basic shapes and so on. But I think there's a deeper undercurrent to that, which I agree with about that and also respected too, which is that things are based on what they are. Like basically like, what is it saying? What is it made out of? And then it looks like that for those reasons. And I think for me, I add another, I like to think of another thing, which is the many people that are involved in it. I like to think of graphic design as a social activity. Basically, it's, you know, a bunch of people get together in meetings and do stuff, and this is what happens. You know, so the work is the evidence of that, but it's also the evidence of the structure of it, the content of it, and it all comes from the inside, and that's something that comes out millions of years ago. And I mean, obviously there's typographic stuff I think about every day that I learn from the book, but that idea that, you know, going from the inside out and not the other way is that's what I think of.
I actually want to read what I wrote about Scott. Would that be good?
What have you done?
No, it's okay. I'm not going to read it all. But so one of the great joys of being a teacher is how many ever years ago that was? 29 years. You look at Scott and you feel proud. I certainly do. And I was just one little part of your education. And I respect the intelligence of the work. Scott Stowell is my kind of designer. His work and that of his colleagues and collaborators at Open is about the creation of effective visual communication. This means the work has a job to do and it gets on with it in an efficient and intelligent manner. I have admired both Scott's concerns and his graphic design work for 25 years. I first met him when he was a student in several of my courses at the Rhode Island School of Design. I often save examples of my best students' work so that I can show it to encourage excellent work from others. I still have Scott's typography work from the late 1980s. As a student, he not only demonstrated a mature understanding of the process of making design, but also the ability to make things that worked, formally, semantically, and functionally. I also preserve examples from graphic design history to exhibit and use in my history of graphic design courses. When Scott moved to Rome to work on Colors magazine, he proudly sent me his first issue. This is an extremely important historical magazine. I enjoyed teaching Scott, the design student, and was amazed at his knowledge of the design profession and his ability to recall examples of contemporary work and designers that supported his ideas and design decisions. And I can tell you, there is one other person that worked in our office, Michael Beirut, some of you know who he is, who was a student at the University of Cincinnati and worked in our office. And I think Chris would probably agree with me, we also felt that same thing about Michael Beirut. He was wise beyond his years. I'm going to cut to the end here. As a designer, Scott is a generalist. I also admire that greatly. He can make work in many different forms and media. He understands how to distill a complex problem into a simple, clear statement of purpose, which you heard again when he's talking about these 5 projects. He is able to respect the needs of clients and users, the constraints of budget and production, and his own personal aesthetic needs, and we all have those. I feel that Scott is always prepared. He enjoys the challenge of finding the right idea upon which to build. However, his preparedness does not rule out serendipity. Scott does things he has never done before, nor has he even seen before. Open's work is not trendy, but it does possess the quality of inventiveness. The work does not call attention to itself. Rather, it sends a message and expects the audience to understand it and respond. That's what I think of skits. And there's more. I don't want to embarrass him by saying other stuff.
Hi. That was such a nice segue to my question. I was curious what advice or recommendations you have for studios that are kind of just starting out and are trying to balance, paying their employees and leaving the lights on with making sure that we continue to push aesthetic boundaries and embark on interesting projects and projects that fulfill the criteria of making things better. How have you balanced those things?
It sounds like you described what I'm dealing with every day. It doesn't change, I don't think. I really don't. If it gets to a point where somebody's sitting there going, we have plenty of money, I'm going to have some ideas, That's not been my experience. And I will tell you a story that years ago, I forget when, it was a while ago, and we were having a real rough patch at the studio. And I basically asked that question to a friend of mine who ran a place called Spot Co. in New York. They do a lot of stuff for Broadway and advertising and stuff, and make a lot of money. And I asked him, I was like, how do you do it? And his response was basically you get used to not being able to do it. But I remember drawing a little diagram on a napkin, and I said, oh yeah, it's like sometimes you have this much money and then there's like none. And then we have this much money and then there's like none. Imagine like a little wave going down to zero. And I was like, if we can just get it to be like up here like this, And he was like, no, that's not what happens. It goes like this now. It goes, like this, and then to none. And then went back up, and then to, and I was like, great, thanks a lot. So, honestly, in terms of real advice, to me, the best thing that I've ever received in that regard is to know that the things that you're going through it's not you. You know what I mean? Like, that those things are not unique. That the idea of like, oh, I really want to do good work, but I have to pay the bills, it's not you. It is, it's me too. And I think that to try to just, take each day as it comes is something that's easier said than done. And I think that, for me, the time when I said this in another talk, but the day that I realized that nobody else knew what they were doing either was the best day. You know what I mean? Because I just, there is no real answer to it. There's very specific things, you could do business-wise or something, but that's not what you're looking for. So that was totally unhelpful.
I would say that you should try to find clients that you would like to work for, and that you would believe.
That's a good idea.
And you believe in them. It's so much easier to do work for things that you believe in. And it's one of the things that kept me working for public television. When I saw I could make more money doing something else, I eventually had to look at myself and say, am I going to leave Big Bird and I'm going to go work for somebody who I don't respect? No. Because that's a value, And the other thing, we used to work with the designer, Jack Foley, that Chris will remember. And Jack had a saying that when faced with a choice, the client will always make the wrong choice. And I used to bridle at that a little bit because I had found that often the clients have really good ideas. And you have to be big enough to say, maybe they have a good idea. And so it's easy to trash clients and blame them for bad work. But eventually, you need to listen to them and make them partners. That's a word you use a lot, partners. In fact, that letter you got from that secret organization is looking for a design partner. And that's an important thing. And you feel good, they feel good, you work together. Sometimes I have been in a situation where I have to design something in front of a client in like 20 minutes. That is often really good somewhere because you can talk about what you're doing and why you do it. And they will treat you with more respect. So for me, that's the most important. Sometimes you might have to do jobs that people are giving you a lot of money, but eventually you hope that it all smooths out.
So I have a question for you, Doug. You've worked for various clients with various industries, and I wanted to ask you, what was one of the things you learned in your experience with working with clients that don't have experience with design, particularly maybe even with co-workers that don't have experience in design? What's one thing you learned and one thing you would want to change looking back at your experience?
Well, I think that if you're working with people who never used designers before, and I work for a lot of them, that one of the things you do is it's your job or your responsibility to teach them, talk to them, and explain to them why you're doing what you're doing. Because only then they understand the value. And I know when I first started, I was expecting that everybody was good clients all the time. And you quickly learn that it isn't that way. And you have to teach them. Or at least to get them to see your point of view and make them a part of it. I wish maybe earlier on I had done that wrong.
2 more questions.
So I finally learned, went back and said, I'm sorry, I can't do this for the following reasons. Maybe later, maybe some other time, keep me in mind, but I gotta say no this time. And that has been hard for me to do.
I think to tie that back to an earlier question, when talking about each other, whatever, that even hearing you talk about all your other work, that idea of basically, what do you call it, being a generalist, but it's more than that. It's like being interested in everything, like being curious about anything. And I mean, if it's not like, oh, we're going to drop nuclear bombs on everyone or something, you know what I mean? Like almost any client, there's something about it that would be interesting. And do they know your value? Are they nice people? Do you support what they do or whatever? But yeah, that idea in Doug and in that work, I mean, I hear you telling stories about this stuff of like, oh, I love invitations. I hate invitations. I
love that.
Right, see? And I feel bad. And I feel bad for saying I hate invitations because like, what is an invitation? It's an invitation. Like, that's such a cool thing. But that idea of being kind of open to everything and interested in everything and having only now said no to somebody, that's amazing. That's Doug.
Take one more question.
Hi. So I think that most brands strive to be human-centered, and most designers really try to speak to their audience like on a deeper level. But I'm really impressed in all the projects that you showed us as to how successfully you've brought an emotional context into your work. And I'm curious as to what your secret is. Is it that you only work with people that have great humility, or is it that you ask the right questions in this research phase of the project?
Well, part of it is I don't show you the bad project. But I think that it's true. But I'm just always thinking like, what, I mean, not that it's about me, but like, what if I was there and what's happened, you know? And you hear all the time, there's all these people talking about empathy and user-centered this and blah, blah, you know, inclusive design. There's like a bunch of different words for it. And even like, you know, they all mean different things or the same thing or nothing. And I just think that like, does it matter, the thing you're doing, you know? And that can go both ways. Like if a client comes in and says, we want to change this thing, you know, the cliche is make the logo bigger or whatever, you know? Who cares? Like, you can't make a thing with a big logo on it? Like, why not? Like that person, if that person's someone you respect, who works well with you or whatever, and you have a relationship with them, why not let them have a big logo or whatever? You know what I mean? I think to me it's about forming a relationship with the people you work with, whether it's co-workers, clients, and for me, of course, particularly the end user. And that doesn't necessarily mean I'm actually responsible for it. But I really want that website to work for this older lady who navigates the website now with the landlord. And that will mean the website can't be as super cool for people who want to see the craziest cool thing. And I am absolutely, because to me that is a generous way of working that is giving to other people and not just. So,
Thank you, Scott Stowell and Doug Scott.